Okay, we are now live. Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Villery from the Committee of 70. I have with us the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, who is running for re-election in Pennsylvania. And today he's going to be interviewed by students from George Washington High School, particularly Mr. Dan Gavin's class. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gavin. And thank you very much, Mr. Attorney General, for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for pulling us together.
Excellent. So I'm going to share my screen. I just have a couple of slides to share for everyone. So first of all, welcome everybody. And just as a quick reminder, Election Day this year is November 3rd. So make sure that if you are registered to vote, that you make a plan to show up on Tuesday, November 3rd to your polling place. So today we are interviewing Josh Shapiro, who is the Democratic candidate and also the incumbent candidate for the Pennsylvania Attorney General. He is interviewed today by my social science class from George Washington High School. Today is October 26th. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Mr. Shapiro, thank you again for agreeing to be here and answer questions from our students today. And with that,
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
thank you. Yeah. With that, our first question comes from Nozima. Nozima, whenever you're ready, you can ask your question.
Okay. Can you briefly tell us a little about your background, education, and experience?
Yeah, absolutely, Nazima. Nice to hear your voice. And let me just say, Mr. Gavin, to you and all the students, I'm really excited to be here. And I know this is a tough school year. I've got 4 school-age kids, and I know it's really hard learning via Zoom. And hopefully, you're going to get a bit of a hybrid model. It sounds like over the next few weeks here. But I know it's tough, and I appreciate the fact that all of you have hopped on here to spend a little bit of time thinking about this upcoming election. You know, for me, I grew up not too far from where you live in Northeast Philly. I actually have a lot of friends who went to GW. I grew up in Upper Dublin, live in Abington. That's where my wife and I are raising our 4 kids. I've just always been involved in the community, you know, different groups growing up and clubs, and, you know, was really active and engaged in college. And then right after college, decided that I was really interested in working in government. And went to work on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. It was my first job. I was 22, I guess, years old. And I got a job answering telephones for a United States senator. I thought that was the coolest job ever. I spent 9 years working on the Hill. My wife and I put me through law school at night at Georgetown while I was working full time. At that point, as a chief of staff to a United States congressman, which is like the top job there. And then in 2004, I came home to the community where I grew up, probably right around the time that a lot of you were being born, and ran for state representative in Abington and got elected there after knocking on 18,000 doors of my friends and neighbors. I served there. I focused a lot on education issues, making sure we had funding for our schools and you know, caring for those who were really needy in our communities. After doing that, I went and served as the head of our Montgomery County government, kind of like being mayor out in Montgomery County, which is the next county over from Philly. And then back in 2016, got elected as the Attorney General of Pennsylvania. So people ask me, well, what is the Attorney General? I'm the chief law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the chief legal officer as well. So it's my job to make sure that all of the laws are enforced and the people are protected. And sometimes that involves arresting someone for doing something violent in our community, like gun violence, for example, or drug dealing. And sometimes it involves suing a big corporation because they're taking advantage of people. One example of that is I sued the biggest student loan company because they were taking advantage of college students, making them pay more for college than they needed to. So that's an example, a couple examples of what the AG does. I'm really proud and honored to serve as AG. I'm running for re-election right now. So when your parents, I don't know if any of you are 18 yet, but when you and or your parents go to vote on election day, or if you've already made your plan and are voting before election day, you'll see right below the race for president, you'll see the race for attorney general. And that's what I'm involved in right now. I hope that answers your question.
All right, the next question comes from Zia. Zia, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so my question for you is, why did you first run for the position of Attorney General, and why are you seeking a second term now?
Thanks, Zia. Look, I think it's the most impactful job in government, and I wanted to be able to do that work to help people. Let me explain what I mean. You know, there are so many people hurting nowadays who get taken advantage of by violent people in their neighborhoods, taken advantage of by big corporations who are just out of control, who take your money and don't give you the product or the service that you were supposed to get. And I look around during my time in government, my time in the community, and see that, like, the rich people have a lot of lawyers, they've got a lot of lobbyists, they've got a lot of people who advocate for them. But oftentimes, students and others get left behind. They sort of get screwed in the system, excuse my language. And I wanted to be their advocate. I wanted to be their lawyer. And I think using the law, that can be a great equalizer in our society, where people can get the help that they need, they can be looked after, and they can be protected. And that's my job as the Attorney General, to look after you guys and to look after all 13 million Pennsylvanians. I take it very seriously. I think I do it well. I'm trying to do it again, to get an opportunity to keep doing it. And that's why I serve.
All right, the next question comes from Ozma. Ozma, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Ozma.
Hi. What is your opinion of the current Defund the Police movement, and what will you do to address the issues being protested?
Sure. Ozma, I think when people say defund police, it means a lot of different things to different people. I'm not going to put you on the spot. That's for Mr. Gavin to do. I would ask you, what do you think it means? I would say, some people would say you need to literally defund the police, have no more police. Other people would say it needs to be something a little bit different than that. We should invest in other things. Let me tell you what my view is. My view is this: I think we need police in our communities. We do need to, of course, make sure that they're following the law, that they're trained on things like implicit bias, that they are people who we trust to keep our community safe. And I do a lot of work to change our laws and to fix the system to make sure that we can work with police and trust police. And obviously, we've got a lot more work to do. My view, however, is not that we should literally defund the police, but rather we should invest a lot more in certain things that will reduce crime and increase safety in our community. Let me be specific what I mean by that. I think we need to invest a lot more in education. And by the way, I'm not just saying that because y'all are here. I say this all the time. We need to invest a lot more in mental health services and drug and alcohol treatment for those who are struggling or those who are in need. We need to invest more in economic opportunities. One of the reasons I started Career Week, which I know that GW participates in, is to show students the economic opportunities that exist for them if they stay in school and work toward their degree and do the work they need to do. I believe that if you invest in those things and you give people hope and opportunity, you will reduce crime, and you'll reduce the amount of work that a police chief has to do, a DA has to do, an attorney general has to do. And as a result of that investment and the reduced amount of crime and the reduced amount of violence in the community, you will gradually be able to bring down the budgets of law enforcement. Law enforcement over the years has been called upon to do a lot more than maybe they should be, like dealing with mental health issues, for example. If you're properly funding that, Ozma, in the proper social services realm or education realm, then you are going to naturally make communities safer and draw resources away from law enforcement where they're no longer needed because your caseloads will come down. So Ozma, that's my view. I recognize that there are other views. Obviously, I would welcome hearing what's on your mind if you or Mr. Gavin would like to share that, but that's my view.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Thank you, Ozma.
Question, Ozma.
Great question.
No.
And cool. I'm sorry, Asma, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I thought he asked if you have any questions. I said no.
Got it. Great question. Cool name. I appreciate you. Thank you, Asma.
Okay, next up is Gladwin. Gladwin, whenever you're ready.
So, respected sir, I would like
Hi, Gladwin.
to ask you a question. So, many people who are unemployed because of the pandemic face eviction from their homes. What will you do to protect Pennsylvanians from eviction? And what will you do to help those who already got evicted?
Yeah. It's horrible what's happening with this public health pandemic. And for so many, the crisis doesn't stop on the health side. It leaks over onto the economic side. There are so many families struggling. Our unemployment rate went into double digits, people not getting paychecks, or if they are getting paychecks, it's much less. And for many of them, they're trying to feed their families and keep a roof over their head, particularly at a time where we're being encouraged to stay home in order to stay safe. So a few months ago, I worked with the governor to put in place a moratorium on evictions all across Pennsylvania. And we were successful at that. Unfortunately, our state law only allowed that moratorium or stoppage to occur for, I think it was about 60 days. Those 60 days have expired. And now technically someone can be evicted from their home. So we called on the legislature, the lawmakers in Harrisburg, to actually pass a new law that gives the governor, gives me the authority to extend that eviction moratorium so that people can't be kicked out of their homes during this pandemic, which obviously has shown no signs of ending. If anything, it's getting much worse right now. Unfortunately, the people that control the legislature in Harrisburg have not passed it, and families are really at risk. The good news for folks who live in Philly in particular, and I presume all of you do by virtue of your presence here today, there are some efforts being done through the courts and through some advocacy organizations locally in Philadelphia. It's not a moratorium, but it's helpful. And it's not ideal. What we really need right now is to protect the families who are really struggling, who can't make a rent payment, who we do not want to see on the streets. We do not want to see in shelters. We want them to be able to stay in their homes and be able to safely care for themselves and their families. So this is something we got to keep working on. Unfortunately, I said at the top, Gladwin, I'm the chief law enforcement officer and the chief legal officer. I get to enforce the laws, but I don't get to make the laws. That's where we need our state representatives and state senators to work with the governor to get something passed.
So, I appreciate the effort you took towards this whole issue. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Gladwin. Thank you for your question.
Okay, next up is Nozima with another question.
Okay. What will you do to make sure Pennsylvania schools are fairly funded?
Oh, Nozima, this is something I have worked on for my entire career. When I ran for state representative back in 2004, I ran on the idea of more funding for our schools and full day kindergarten, something that didn't exist when I ran. And I have been, kind of beating that drum every year since then, trying to increase funding for schools. The good news is that Governor Wolf has increased funding for schools across Pennsylvania by more than $1 billion and has set aside additional funding for Philadelphia schools. I believe we need to do far more. I was talking about this in response to one of the questions earlier. I think it was Asma's question about defunding the police and the idea that if we invest more in schools and create safe and good learning environments for students, we'll actually make our communities safer. And so I believe that, even putting aside all the great educational reasons why we should invest in schools, it's going to make our community safer. And we should be doing that. So we need to put more money into schools. And I would say not just into the learning side of what, you and Mr. Gavin do together, but I also think there needs to be real money put into making sure the buildings are safe for students. I'm deeply concerned about lead and asbestos in some of our schools. Candidly, I don't know whether this is an issue for your particular school, but I know that it's a big issue for several other schools. I'll just tell you quickly, in Scranton, which is a town that's up in the northeastern part of our state, I just filed criminal charges against school officials for knowing that these buildings were dangerous. They had lead and asbestos and not doing anything about it. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's what's happening here in Philadelphia. It's pretty well known, the challenges that exist in the schools, but I think real resources need to go to making sure that these buildings are safe for you, the students, and for you, Mr. Gavin, you and your colleague or fellow teachers as well.
Okay, our last question comes from Zia.
Hey, Zia.
Hi.
You get to go again, huh?
Yeah. Last
Go
question
ahead.
for you today is, why do you think it's so important for young people to vote?
Look, I say this, by the way, as the father of an 18-year-old whose election, this will be her first election. We are in a tough place in this country, and we need a lot of change, and we need to fix a lot of problems. And when I think about some of the biggest problems that are facing us today, the climate crisis, the need for criminal justice reform, gun violence, especially gun violence in our schools, I think about those three issues as being huge threats in our community. In the case of climate, really across the world. And young people, folks your age, are the ones literally leading those conversations. You've been righteously and peacefully demonstrating and marching and tweeting and posting and holding your elected officials accountable. When you vote, particularly when you vote on those issues and you vote in big numbers, you're going to get representatives, whether in Harrisburg or Washington or the Attorney General or whatever, who are going to recognize that they're in their jobs because of young people like you, who made a point to get out and vote and voted on those, and I'm sure many other really important issues. In addition to that, in just a few short years, you all will be the ones in these jobs. You'll be running for state rep. You'll be running for city council. You'll be the ones leading the way. And for those of you who are on this Zoom who think, man, I would never run for office. I don't care about government. I don't care about politics. Whatever you end up doing, in some way, it's going to be interconnected with politics. And so if you vote and if you engage, through protests or through social media, whatever it is that you do, you're going to affect the outcome of these elections and who's in office. And then they'll be more responsive to the needs that you have and the issues that are important to you. So that's why I think you got to be engaged, whether you can vote right now, whether you're 18 or not.
All right, so that was our last question for today. Mr. Shapiro, thank you so much for joining us and helping answer some of our students' questions. I have a few slides of just some helpful information about deadlines and the process to vote, so I'm going to share my screen real quick one last time. All right, so the deadline to register to vote has passed. However, you can still apply for a mail-in ballot. The mail-in ballot deadline, application deadline, is the 27th. So please make sure to apply for your mail-in ballot if that's how you're choosing to vote by going to votespa.com. Additionally, there is still early voting going on in Philadelphia. So George Washington High School, for example, is one of those early voting locations. So you can show up to one of these locations, register, and vote all in one stop. And so that will be ending again tomorrow, the 27th. You can learn about other candidates running for both Attorney General and other positions at wevote.70.org. And if you're looking for one of those satellite election offices where early voting is happening, all you need to do is go to phillyearlyvoting.com. Now, if you're voting on election day, if you plan on voting in person on November 3rd, you find your polling place by going to votespa.com/polling place. Now, if you are choosing to use a mail-in ballot to vote, you need to make sure to read the instructions carefully and complete the ballot as instructed. So there are many pieces inside your mail-in ballot between ballot measures, instructions on how to complete the ballot, the actual ballot where you decide who you're going to vote for. Once you fill that out, you place it inside the secrecy envelope, and the secrecy envelope then goes inside the outer envelope, and that is what you will sign and then drop at one of these early voting locations or your polling place on election day or into the mail. And lastly, if you still would like to become active in voter registration and voter education, there are many great Philadelphia organizations you can be a part of, regardless whether or not you are going to do more and be active and make your voice heard. You should at least follow these organizations on their social media accounts. So follow Philly Youth Vote at Philly Youth Vote, or you can email them at phillyyouthvote@gmail.com. You should follow Vote That John at Vote That John. You can email them or go to their website, votethatjohn.org. And then My School Votes Philly has social media at When Philly Votes. And if you have any questions or would like to join any of these organizations, right, you can reach out to them and do so. So make sure to get out the vote. Show up on November 3rd if you're voting in person, or if you have already requested your mail-in ballot, that you do so as soon as possible. So thank you once again, Mr. Shapiro, for joining us.
My pleasure, gang. Make sure you do exactly what Mr. Gavin said. Make your plan to vote, whether you vote by mail or whether you want to show up and vote in person on November 3rd. It's going to count no matter what. As your Attorney General, I'm making sure that all votes are counted. And if you can't vote, you've got a really important role to nudge whoever along, your parents, your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents, your friends, your neighbors. If you look at an adult near you who hasn't voted or made a plan to vote yet, and you say, come on, you got to vote, they're going to listen to you. They may not listen to Mr. Gavin or Mr. Murtaugh or me, but they will listen to you. So please, 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 please make sure you push people to vote. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you soon.